Okay, welcome to the Beautiful Podcast. The Beautiful Podcast seeks to uncover the hidden mysteries that have been buried in our birth charts for far too long. Each aspect is a shining jewel in our apron that, with some care, can be seen and realized. Today, I speak with Paloma Cumplido, a shamanic astrologer. She is Saturn in Libra sitting in the ninth house, and then also the 10th house if you're looking at her chart from a whole signs perspective. Also in Libra are Pluto, which is sitting right on her midheaven, and Mars. Paloma is also a Capricorn rising with Mercury in the first house and the Sun in the 12th house, also in the sign Capricorn. And this is the beginning of a series called The Faces of Saturn. Thank you. Okay. I really wanted to start the series with you. And then I find out that you have Saturn in an exalted sign. Of course, that doesn't mean that life is so much easier for you or anything, but I think it's a nice start to see Saturn in a place that it enjoys being in, at least, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Yes, you did mention that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I agree. I mean, people think I'm an astrologer. I think I'm more like a storyteller.
Ah, okay, okay. Beautiful.
I think of myself
Um,
more as a storyteller of
mm,
what I sort of read and hear from the astrology, and I use it to, I would say, accompany processes for people and myself, no, as a tool, no, that I find in my own experience, like you were sharing, has helped me make sense of things, no, and
mm.
and find meaning and find like evolutionary paths. No, that's why I think I resonate. And also I somehow started doing astrology and it felt like it flowed in me. No, I think anyone that approaches astrology like really gets called into it, it's more a remembering than an actual learning. It's like something awakens that you already know somehow.
I very much yeah, I resonate with this. I think that's a very powerful statement. Um, mm. So you say that you tell stories. Can you give an example? I don't know how if it works like this, but can you give an example of a story that you have told or tell, or the way that you are able to weave stories in your life?
I guess I'll give you a little background context maybe to why this is. So I before I actually jumped into, just because now all I do is astrology and these kind of processes with people and with groups. But before I was a singer, a jazz singer for quite some time, and I actually studied acting, drama, and I was in communication, and I was a TV presenter for many years. So my house, like my family, they're all musicians, and so I was raised in a also very spiritually inclined family. So I was raised in this very cultural, arty sort of context. So I guess storytelling and communication since I was a child was like a way to, I'm very sensitive, no? So to like weave all of these sort of difficult to put into words or to understand into something coherent. And I
Mm,
think because of the acting, the storytelling, the all of this, it gave me a language, and I enjoy very much playing with words. I also think, as you said earlier, aside from the information that words carry, they carry frequency. No, so I think
mm,
the melody in the way we speak, sometimes
mm,
it's like a multi-layered message. No, there's the words, the information, there's the frequency of the melody of the voice, and there's something else, no, the invisible realm operating through communication. So I'm very passionate about it. And so I call myself a storyteller because I've always, ever since I started sharing astrology, somehow I named it the story the sky is telling, because to me it's like I see them as characters, as these intricate I don't know, storylines mixing up, and I sort of like see it like threads, and I try to weave those threads into something that feels coherent in my heart, and also with what the energy is speaking to. I don't know if I'm making sense to you, but the
no,
energy
you
is
are.
speaking to me about. So I try to turn it into a story. I think it's I call it like a never-ending story of love that has many different expressions. So yeah, I think of myself as a storyteller for these energetics that the sky delivers for us. Did
I
that make
see.
sense?
Yes, yes, yes. Um, it made sense to me. I'm grounding into your message. Um, yeah, it actually it sounds like a very Jupiterian kind of way to look at everything. I know we're talking about Saturn, but like that's where my mind goes.
Hmm.
Um, and you have, yeah, and you got Jupiter in your right up there in your 10th house of your chart. And I feel like somehow in my life I've been surrounded by a lot of women who seem to have this placement, and they're women who have very powerful, yeah, stories to tell, powerful messages. Um, yeah, whether they know it or not. You know, when you can sense the presence of someone and that they have something to give and share. Obviously, everyone does, but in a certain way, these women seem to. And you have that displacement as well. So I find that interesting. I see Saturn as being, I guess, the symbol of the archetype of the teacher and the protector. And I know people tend to look at Jupiter as being the protector, which Jupiter is. But the thing I love about Saturn is that I feel like all the lessons that Saturn puts one through, at least especially during formative years, because I'm about to be 30. So this is all the
Okay.
experience I have so far. But I've seen how those lessons that I attribute to Saturn have helped me immeasurably. Um, like later on. And I'm like, oh, because I went through this, it was to protect me from this hardship that I would have went through if I didn't face this thing, or if I didn't at least try to um, put straight this part of life that Saturn was asking me to take care of in a very
Hmm.
painful way. Um, so this is how I see Saturn. I'm curious about how you see Saturn.
Wow. To me, it's been a journey of because I'm as you can see, or people might see in my chart, I have a lot of Capricorn, so very Saturnian. And I think it's been a journey of opening up new layers of Saturn. I think it's a character. I find it very nice that you call him a protector and a teacher. But I think Saturn is one of these characters that is given to us if when we arrive, still very permeated by this very patriarchal sort of understanding of him, no, of
Mm,
authority, of rigidity, of rules, of control, and all of these more shadowy aspects, I would say, of both Saturn and the Capricorn energy. So I think I've been through a journey of sort of yeah, like trying to transform and transcend this version of Saturn so I could open up to other ways of understanding structure, of understanding authority within myself, of understanding boundaries, and of actually understanding he's calling me into service. I don't know if you've noticed in my chart, I have Saturn squaring my nodes as well and my Mercury. So it's like a very main character in my chart. And I was excited when you called about Saturn, a little bit different than you. Like I read charts very often and I'm very aware of what's going on in the astrology, but sometimes I forget to look into my own chart, you know. I'm like, yesterday someone was asking me like, what are your transits? When I was like, oh my God, I don't know. I haven't even checked. No, because I'm just there telling the story. And you brought me into looking at my Saturn and my life that has such like very evident moments in life, no, because he works through the septens. No, there's always an aspect with Saturn when you're 7, when you're 14, when you're 21, when you're no,
mm,
it's very structured the way in which he takes you through the maturation of who you truly are. And in my case, my first experiences of Saturn, I would say first half of my life, was very much in the more traditional, or trying to, I guess, trying to fit into the structure to eventually find out that I needed to create my own structure and my own understanding. And to me, for example, it had to shift from understanding him at some point. I needed to shift my perception of Saturn from a very masculine energy to a feminine, like a grandmother. So I could soften the way in which I was living it, experiencing him, and also sharing his energy. Um,
mm,
so
mm,
at this point, I think of Saturn I love him much more than before, which was harder. But right now, I find him to be the source of inner authority and maturation that allows for true creativity and our gifts to become legacy and to become manifested in this realm. I think he's a manifester. He is to me a bridge between the invisible realms, let's say, into the visible through his lessons of discipline and consistency. So I think he allows us to create reality when we find in him an ally instead of this very restrictive sort of like, yeah, this other version that feels more restrictive, like thinking of Kronos, which is Saturn devouring his children. So I've experienced Saturn sometimes like he's devouring me and devouring time, and then shifting the perspective into the structure of time and the structure of reality, which I think Saturn holds a lot as a way in which we can participate with him by understanding from the placement in our chart, what is he asking of us as, I'm going to come with another idea, ancestors. Because I think he's very linked to this idea of legacy and becoming aware that we are ancestors of someone else. That's very Capricornian as well. No, it's like, okay, whatever I do will have resonance through time, no? Very Saturnian, and maturing into this awareness from a place of love. Something like that.
I see. Yeah, as you were speaking, all sorts of thoughts popped into the mind. The first one is so Saturn as grandmother. Um, and you were reflecting beautifully on this, and then you brought in the idea of ancestors, as you said, which is just so tied to Capricorn. So as soon as you said that, I see Capricorn as being a sign that speaks to kind of like a time capsule. And with Capricorn sitting on the Capricorn Cancer axis, I see it being a time capsule of the symbols that represent the most intimate parts of one's like self and how one has experienced being at home and being with those that they love and care and those who nurture them. So this time capsule helps remind us about our roots and where we come from and our history and our potential because we see those roots. So in terms of the grandmother, um, can you share a story about an experience that you had um, experiencing Saturn in that grandmother sort of role?
Okay. So this is when I started shifting and the idea of perceiving Saturn more as a grandmother was very intentional because I knew I needed to soften my approach to Saturn energy and my own way of being Capricornian and Saturnian. No, because I feel like the sort of like, yeah, like the shadow side of these both archetypes, it's sometimes rigidity, like too much control. So in order
Yes.
to soften, I needed to bring it into a more feminine, for me, in my perception, into a more feminine way. And for example, when I actually started sharing the videos of astrology, this was a big threshold for me after all that I was doing before. I needed to approach this part of myself that tends to be very disciplined and very productive because of the Capricorn and all, from a place that wasn't in service to what others expected, and a place that wasn't in service to, I don't know, a demand, no, a pushing me through because of, I don't know, which neurosis in my mind. No, I needed it to come from a softer place, yet I needed to feel disciplined about it because that's important for me. So the way in which I approached it, I think it was more tender. So I put it the discipline and the consistency that's there, but from a more loving place than before in my life, which meant I will do this when it feels like it comes from my heart, but I will show up through my own. I guess what Saturn has really helped me do is, even in the moments where I feel very vulnerable about these thresholds of opening up to more of my truth, he is a powerful force within me that I feel helps me show up. No, but the way in which I showed up before came from a place of a lot of demand. No, and this time in this more grandmother, like sort of a caring grandmother, inviting me to show up, helped me show up from a place that didn't have the cost in my body and in all of my bodies, I would say, that my productivity had before. So I guess the way in which I experienced work, discipline, all of these things that came from a place of hyper productivity before and a lot of demand. When I shifted into the grandmother, she was like, we are still going to stay in the discipline and consistency, but from a more devotional way than from the what I'm supposed to do. So I think when I entered this stage of my life of what I do now, I started working with Saturn more as a grandmother that invited me to a devotional consistency than this very rigid, more patriarchal sort of discipline or control. And it started feeling more embracing and less pushy now when I started doing these videos. And I think that shifted something inside of me. And this was after my Saturn return.
Thanks for sharing that little. This was after Saturn return, because I think, yeah, one can put, I guess, when one's in that one sort of maybe stereotypical layer of Saturn, one can put so
Yeah.
much pressure on themselves.
Yeah.
So that reminds me that it's a journey. It takes time. It's Saturn.
It's
Um,
Saturn. It's about time. He is about time.
mm. So
May I add
then,
something?
yes, please, yes.
In terms of time, what also started helping me with Saturn to move out of this very traditional, because at the end, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in subjects, but my mind's
This is
going to
good.
many places. But at the end, we do, at the beginning, as I said, associate Saturn and Capricorn to tradition. No, and there's a layer of ancestry and tradition that needs to be honored, but there's a layer of tradition that ends up conditioning our freedom. No, and we need to like discern what tradition and what needs to be honored and kept alive. And I think that's a big part of this. But there's also the tradition that might come conditioning our own expression in our lives. No? So as I said, I think the first stage of my life, I was trying to fit into tradition in terms of culture, in terms of family, and that wasn't really the calling, but we all try to, keep belonging somehow until we start finding our own path towards authenticity. No? And when I started working with Saturn in a more, to me, I needed to go into a more feminine aspect of or perception of also time, which is sort of ruled by this archetype of Saturn, in the structure that we live in is very patriarchal, very rigid. It's very artificial because the calendars that we work with are not attuned to nature, to the moon, to anything. No, they're very artificial. So it started opening me up to time, to natural time. It's funny because it's still Saturn and it's a structure, but from the feminine aspect, it allowed me to enter the experience of time as it is expressed in nature, which is cyclical. No, it's not as rigid, it's not as linear, it's more spiral. No, and this spiral movement of time, this cyclical movement of time, allowed for this what I felt like rigidity and control to start softening. So it's still time, but it's time that is attuned to how time expresses in the earth, which is through seasons, no, through day and night. And it started bringing me out of this, I would say, artificial experience of time of on Monday, I'm supposed to have energy. On Friday, I'm supposed to feel excited about the weekend and starting really attuning to the cyclicity, if I think that's a word, or the cycles of my own experience of time. So it was still a structure of time, which is Saturnian, but it brought into this feminine experience. It helped me enter this. Did that make sense?
Yes, very much. You're making my mind go, oh. Um, so in what you were sharing, the thought about Saturn as hierarchy came to mind because I think, like when we're first learning about astrology, and this is the planet Saturn, I think an imagery that is discussed a lot is a goat climbing a mountain. And I guess goats, like mother goats, they carry their little babies with them too. So it is actually quite a sweet situation, isn't it? But I guess the thing that would stick with me is, oh, this is a mountain and it's almost like a lateral climb because the mountain's so steep and somehow they're able to keep their balance. It takes a long time, but eventually they get there. So I think there's this idea of Saturn as being very linear versus cyclical. But I appreciate that you share how it's about the cycles of nature, the rhythms. So if you could touch on how maybe these two worlds are bridged, or maybe there's a different way that I can look at Saturn in regard to um, this word hierarchy.
Hierarchy. So let me think. I think because Saturn is the last planet that we can see with the naked eye, no, in theory. I mean, he's the last one. That's why the rings and the boundaries of what we call in shamanism, we call it the middle realm. Now there's three realms. It's a beautiful tree. So it's the underworld, the middle world, and the higher world. And I like to place planets in these realms so they deliver their lessons from these different frequencies. They're all interdependent. No, but Saturn is the limit between these other realms that are invisible. No, so to be very simple and in a description of shamanism, it's just about navigating the invisible realms. So I think astrology is per se very shamanic because it requires to look into the night sky. If you think of how it started, no, it's more like a contemplative practice of observing into the invisible realms and finding the patterns and the cycles. No, I think that's pretty much shamanism is like navigating between realities or perceptions. And so Saturn is a boundary between these realms, but at the same time, he's a source for these invisible realms to become manifested in the tangible realm. So that's why I think of him as an ally to build, to actually construct something in our lives.
Mm.
To go into your question, sort of the bridging between these, you were asking of bridging
Mm.
the perception of Saturn as hierarchy and this perception of Saturn as the cyclical time. Did I understand that correctly?
I suppose. I guess it's more like in the way that you share this very deep, powerful things you're saying. I can hear this. Initially, I would have said duality, but it sounds even more like it's a holistic experience. Um, yeah, so I guess I'm wondering about that relationship.
I think,
Um, mm,
yeah, I think I'm gonna grab the goat you said to try and bridge this. No, because as I said, I don't know if duality, but I have experienced that I've had a polarized, let's say, experience of Saturn. I've known the Saturn that is rigid and authoritarian and controlling, and
mm,
we can go over how many bone fractures I've had, which have been Saturn. It's like Saturn has an activation in my chart, and I have a fracture. For some years, that was the story. No, because it's the breaking of the structures, so they can reconfigure into a different way of understanding structure. So that's been very it hasn't been symbolic. It's been very literal. In my body, I have broken several bones, which felt like they're calling me into a deeper understanding of Saturn, breaking the rigid or controlling structures into a new understanding of it. No, and so the goat, if you remember, the Capricorn goat we have this idea, no, of going up all the way to the mountain, this ambition, and I think these are things that are there, but sometimes we forget the actual glyph is a sea goat. So I think sometimes this is the watery feminine aspect of Saturn that I'm bringing forward. So it's not only a goat, but it's a sea goat. So it's aiming for the highest in terms of excellency because there's this thriving towards bringing forward the best we have as an offering, becoming aware that we are ancestors and that we are legacy. But there's also the depth. No, this tail, this fish tail or mermaid tail, if you want. It's also a part that I think we were stripped of this part of Saturn and Capricorn for many, many years through this idea of patriarchy and hierarchy in a very vertical way. No, and if you think of it in a more horizontal or wavy way, it's a different way of organizing ourselves and our culture. I think they're very cultural, like they create culture, both the axis Cancer Capricorn, because they have to do with what you were saying. It's the intimate, but it's also the structure of culture or the consensus of reality that we are sort of agreeing on. And when we were experiencing Saturn, and I was experiencing Saturn without the fishtail or the mermaid tail, I was lacking the depth, the water, the cyclical, the feminine. No, because and I think there's a bridge there when you start understanding it as this whole mythological creature that goes towards the height, but also towards the depth. Then I think that's when it started shifting for me how to experience Saturn. But it's been a journey, and I can also say, oh, I lost my track of thought, but I was going to say something about my integrations of the Saturn like key points in my life. They don't happen while I'm in there. It's pretty much it's always with Saturn a matter of like time and integration. No, so it's for me, my Saturn big moments have been a process of now I'm very much into this, like the post transit. After the transit, things start to make sense to me. During the transit, it's more like I don't know what's going on, something's going on. But post transit is like, oh, no. So he also gives you the sort of delayed gratification and understanding, which also means maturation. No. And as a small joke, I was like asking my audience at some point, what did mature meant to them? Because I was like, yeah, talking slightly about Saturn. And the best answer that I got was, it's when a fruit is delicious and ready to be eaten. And I thought that was, because I didn't think of it. I was thinking about in human terms, what does it mean to be mature? And it just gave me a spark of humor about, right, when you mature is when you are ripe, no? When you become the most tasty you can be. And I think with Saturn, it's a journey of such, no? I guess maybe it's because I have that much Capricorn that it is now later in my life that I can look at this energy from a more loving point of view, but it wasn't always like this. Oh, I remember now. Is it okay if I share something else? Okay. I was thinking when I started trying to shift my perspective into a more, as I said, loving authority and loving experience of Saturn, and working with feminine energy, this opened me up to trying understand my Capricorn as well, because it's very there. It's the sun, the rising, the Mercury, the South Node. And I went into the body, because it rules the bones. And as I was shifting it into feminine energy, and I'm going to make a small parenthesis, I don't think it's about it being feminine or masculine. It's just what I needed in order to reconfigure my experience, right? That was my case. But I think it opens something. And coming into the body, I thought about the hip of a woman, no? Because at the end, Cancer Capricorn, I mean Capricorn Cancer, Cancer being life and birth, no? And I was like, okay, so Capricorn is a structure, the deep structure, the bone structure that holds us straight. And in the body of a woman, for example, the hip bones are as strong as any other bone, but it's a structure that is in such service to life that it becomes flexible so that life can flow through. And that just sort of changed everything inside of me, because these bones are there to hold us, standing. And yet, when birth time comes, these bones are opened. Literally, the bones in the hip of a woman open so a baby can go through. And that's healthy Capricorn. My structure is to be in service of life. If life isn't flowing through my structure, then I am in the older version of Capricorn that asphyxiates life sometimes. No, it becomes so rigid and so stagnant that it doesn't allow the flow of life to go through. So this is something I actually ask myself constantly, because I have an inertia in Capricorn to create a structure of my daily life, for example, that becomes too intense in terms of productivity. I have an inclination to workaholic now, so I need to be aware of it. If I'm not aware, then it's just something that happens. And suddenly my agenda is just like crazy busy. And then I stop and I'm like, is this structure in service of life, in service of creativity? What is this structure serving and holding? no? And that's when I can again soften into some flexibility and see if life is flowing through it or if it's being trapped by it. And that was also my way of understanding Saturn. Every time I had a strong lesson, like those fractures or some other moments, I was like, what structure was in my life being so rigid that life wasn't able to flow, and therefore it had to break. No, my structure had to break because life was pushing and I wasn't letting life move through my structure. Is that making sense?
Yes, it's making, or is it? As you're speaking, you're like I spent years of my life following a very specific practice um, that I hold like really dear to my heart. It's like it's truth for me, you know, like it's. But I think I was very much in a space of Saturn, and probably still am. I'm going through my Saturn return anyway, so that was that sort of restrictive, like not recognizing that the hip bone is flexible. I'm like in that other sort of space. And then uh, this is like, I think in my nodal opposition time when I was like 26 is what. So I experienced that I just needed to move through a lot of forgiveness with myself. I went into Pisces rising, so I went into the Pisces much more so. Before I was I was in this sort of space of Virgo, Mercury, but you know, it's like, this makes sense. This is rational. That's what we're doing. And so I saw that I was neglecting part of myself. So I went into that Pisces space and the Cancer space. Um, and I'm so much more powerful for it, I think, in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I feel like I've kind of let myself down because I put some distance between this way of structuring my life that was benefiting me. Because I just felt like however I had chosen to arrange that, it's just, I can't, like, my bandwidth is done. I cannot. And so anyways, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm trying to learn from your wisdom
Mm.
because I feel like I was doing very, very rigid. And then I started to embrace the mermaid tail. But now I'm in a place where it's like, it seems like the structure is maybe not
Where,
gone, but it's absent. Where is it? Yeah.
where is it? I hear you. I hear you. I resonate. I've been through it. I think um, I think it's natural in my experience and why what I observe that we pendulate a little bit. So to me, I've lessened the judgment to this because we sort of pendulate, so we find the middle point, you know, the balance. So I think it's natural. Sometimes I experienced it like that. So I went all the way to the more rigid and like I had this whole character, this persona built. By the time I got to my Saturn return, I was like recognized in my hometown by all that I was doing, but it stopped making sense to me because it was built uh, a part of it authentically because I love what I do and I loved it then, but it was very much in service to this public persona. And then I pendulated into like losing the structure, and it felt very chaotic for a while. I would say I don't I don't want to label it as depression, but it felt like a moment of confusion, I would say, no? Because I was, okay, this structure is asphyxiating something. I don't know what it is, no? But I needed to let go of that structure. And I entered this space, which is very with that lack of structure. But that lack of structure also gives you a deeper understanding of parts that were left out of the structure. I don't know if that makes sense. And then it comes back together. Also, you could see, or sometimes understanding Saturn as there is this in the Piscean energy, for example, and I do have the sun in the 12th. It's this immensity, no, the infinity of everything, and it's beautiful to be in touch with it. And Saturn gives it a container. So as you said earlier, I liked how you said a protector. The structure is also a container. no, for this infinite energy that is so vast and so amazing, but we can also lose ourselves a little bit there. So the structure, instead of thinking of a structure that is gonna cut ourselves from that connection, it's gonna give it a container so we can experience it in a more organized and ordered way. I think it brings some order to the experience. But I find it natural that we pendulate a little bit before we find what is our middle point between the structure and the flow, no, and how they can work together. That's why in the body it felt so nice to understand it in the opening of the hips. And I was like, okay, there's a time for the hips to open and a time for the bones to be closed and to be the container of this life as well. So nothing can enter and disturb the process, for example, of a pregnancy. And that's a closed container. But then there's a time for the container to be wide and open so life can flow. Because I feel with Saturn, sometimes we find safety, no, or some security in a structure. And then this structure starts being tight because we grow. And it's about growing and maturing. And when this structure, it doesn't mean it was a bad structure, it was patriarchal, or it's not even about labeling, it's just we're growing. And then the structure is a little too tight, and there's the growing pains, literally, the bones hurt when we're growing, the growing pains, and sometimes it needs to give in a little bit. So it creates more space for who we are becoming. So if we fight the processes, they become painful. That's the truth. And I think pain is also just part of the human experience. But the more resistance we have to these moments, the more they create friction or like a lot of inner tension. No, and the more we understand these are like growing pains because this structure is too small for me now. And I mean, childbirth is kind of intense, no? So the opening of the hips is like, okay, let's open the structure and allow this new flow of who I am becoming to find a new way of structuring life. I think to me, it has become a process now of just a lot more compassion, I think, in terms of how I see these parts of my own story and anyone's story or moment. When there's a Saturn there, it's like we need to put more tenderness into it. Otherwise, it becomes more rigid. It's interesting, no? The more we resist it, the more we contract, the more it hurts, no? And the more we soften, it's like childbirth. The more you soften and soften and soften, then nature is operating through us, and we can get in the way or we can allow. So it's funny because even though it's the planet of discipline and consistency, the way in which I have found it to be just gentler to work with him is through allowing his mastery to unfold and to be incorporated, no, in ourselves. I have as you said, I have a Saturn in my ninth house. No, so I guess a very like a like you said, when you start studying Saturn, as I know it's exalted in Libra, but he's called the malefic. I mean, look at how he is given to us. No, he's like, okay, here you have Saturn, he's the malefic. No, it's a predisposition to like be so, I don't know, a bit scared of him. No, and for me, Saturn in the ninth, for example, in very mundane sort of experience, for many years, I felt a restriction that no one imposed on me. But I felt like all of my brothers were studying abroad, and I felt I couldn't. I don't know why. Just like they were all studying in, I don't know, other countries now. And I didn't feel that was for me. But as the sensation was, no, I can't. No, and that was interesting. When I look back, I was like, who told me I couldn't? It's funny, but I needed to grow an inner authority that gave me the permission of what I really wanted. And Saturn in the ninth for me felt like a restriction in terms of my studies, my traveling, and my validating my own wisdom. I could say to me, Saturn in the ninth is very, very much like an imposter syndrome. When you're in the rigid part, it's like you don't feel like you're enough to share wisdom. So the threshold for me to share was through Saturn telling me, you should study a little bit more. You should have another certification. You should like this voice. No, I was like, okay, this is a shadow part of this, but he's actually inviting me to become a teacher of sorts, no, to embrace the wisdom of the lessons that he has given me. And I need to be humble enough to accept he's calling me into it. I don't know if that made sense, but to ground it into some like very key aspects of my life. For many years, I didn't even travel. And I was like, that's so weird because there was Saturn in my ninth, no?
Yeah. I guess, yes, ninth. And then also the way that I'm looking at the chart is also through a whole signs perspective, like Hellenistic astrology sort of
Okay.
perspective. And so Saturn, for me, like from what I would see, would also be in your 10th house.
Your 10th,
Um,
my
but,
10th.
huh, and Ah, hmm. I mean, as you're speaking, something that I noticed was that when you mentioned hips and when you mentioned, oh, there's another word that was so Libra coded. I was like, so interesting because, she's Saturn and Libra, she's discussing Saturn. So these Libra things will come up. Something I really appreciate about how you've been speaking is that you're uncovering these layers of a mystical Saturn. I don't remember where I read this or saw this, but it was like a reputable source. They were speaking about how the sign of Capricorn, your rising sign, is also the sign of the disciple or the initiate into a sort of, let's say, higher calling or a calling that's separate from the materialistic, strictly the materialistic world. And so, in everything you shared in your journey, I'm hearing that. Um, and so I wonder about the flexibility of having the placement of Saturn in Libra. Um, and maybe one is able to move away from, um, I don't want to say simplistic, I think simplicity is a virtue, but too restrictive definitions of what Saturn's about into exploring yeah, I guess a different sort of experience.
Mm.
And I think something that might aid that is your Pluto sitting on your midheaven. So I wanted to ask you about that because you just said about malefics. I know Pluto's not a malefic, but like it's Pluto. So, right? Like it's Pluto. And you've
Okay.
got Mars there as well. You got everything that is, you know,
That is
scary.
scary, no? See,
Yeah.
I think when I started looking at astrology and I looked at my chart, I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave that for another moment. I'm gonna focus on my Pisces moon and try to handle things from there. I think I'm still figuring that out, to be honest. I don't think one is ever through the understanding or the unfoldment of consciousness through the chart until we leave this, no?
Mm.
I think the Libra that you were saying, this is a good example. When I was saying of this first, like, let's say, first half of my life that was more Capricornian, thinking of Saturn in Libra, I was more inclining towards the Libra aspect of being very complaciente, like people pleasing. No, like I had all of this authority. It looked like it, but it was positioned in me in order to be liked, no, or to be admired. Or I can see that, and that's a Libra part of it. It's also there because Libra has this tendency, no, and like shifting the Libra into, for me, Libra, aside from relationship, this has also something I have had to do with Libra so I can widen my understanding. I find that sometimes it's very reductionist to think of Libra as just interpersonal relationships. So I call Libra the school of sacred relationship, but I think everything is a relationship. We are in relation with everything. So this widens the Libra environment from the romantic or the very interpersonal relationship that is it's too small for such a vast archetype, into opening myself up into everything is, we are all related, no, basically. So I think Libra holds that wisdom that we are all related, no, and shifting, aside from this, reconfiguring my approach to Saturn to Libra as well was, okay, we are all related. So part of my calling from Saturn has to do with retrieving the wisdom of being in relationship in harmonic or restoring harmony, which is for me Libra, and beauty within all relationships. So I sort of grabbed that as one of my, like, my purposes, no, or my message. And as you were saying, the disciple thing, the word discipline, one of the origins of the word discipline or etymologies is disciple. So that's a beautiful way of approaching anyone's. If you go to your Saturn and you see where you have your Saturn, the sign, the house, and you can ask Saturn, what am I a disciple of? Because he's the teacher, no? And you ought to become an authority into this through your life, not immediately, but you can see what you are a disciple of. And that's a beautiful thing that you brought, because it gives you, it allows you to understand your role in relationship to this figure of loving authority, that you are an initiate and a disciple of. So if I see my Saturn in Libra, I am a disciple of harmony and relationships, of beauty. This is what I'm a disciple of. This is what I'm initiating myself in, so I can become a loving teacher or authority eventually in this or another lifetime of what Saturn is calling me towards. And I think this gives a very on point, I would say, sort of way of approaching Saturn. Is like, what is he calling you to be a disciple of? And are you tending to the lessons? See?
See. Um, huh.
Oh, I didn't speak of Pluto.
Oh, that well, I'm stuck on what you just shared.
Yeah.
Because now I'm thinking about I've got Saturn and Aries. It's interesting because we're on the same axis, but
Ah, of course, you
yeah.
have some Aries. So what are you a disciple of? So for me, in the shamanic astrology, Aries, we call Aries so we have a name for each sign, no? And Aries, we call the energy that is a custodian of sacred causes. Like, what is the sacred cause? Like, there's an activism in the axis, actually, Libra and Aries. But from this fire, I am meant to open, to protect, and to initiate. So I am a disciple of what sacred cause? So the question would be, what are the sacred causes that light or lit my heart? No, so I can
Hmm.
align with those sacred causes, because there's also the warrior energy there. So in order not to bring the warrior energy towards war, it's about protection. Also, no, it's about one who protects and opens new possibilities. So sort of like that, uh, a
Yeah.
way of life.
Mm. Wow. Yes. Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna chew on everything you're
Sí,
sharing.
sí.
Another question that I had for you was, I find it interesting. You've got, I guess you'll share about the shamanic perspective. Um, I find it interesting that you've got Mars, a planet that is so kind of viscerally associated with now and impulse and energy, sitting in the same sign as a planet that's about later, wait. And then to top it off, you've got, yes, that energy of Pluto, which intensifies. So I'm curious about your experiences with possibly impulse versus having to let things mature, the fruit gets ripe so you can eat it. I'm curious what that experience might have been for you so far.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, it's been frustrating. I've had to learn. I actually think frustration is also a teacher, no? But it's true. I have had this, because the sensation sometimes is like you're hitting the brake and the accelerator at the same time for me, that those placements. It's like I want, and I have a hasty energy. I think because I have a lot of energy in my first house, I'm sort of jumping and like fast paced. And then there's this energy saying, no. So sometimes the sensation is like having both things at the same time, the brake and the accelerator. And it's like, and I guess this has been my journey of working through all kinds of tools and resources to manage inside of me, through
Mm.
breath, through movement, through somatics, no, to like understanding timing. I honestly think with Pluto, the biggest lesson, and because he's in that configuration, is usually surrender. No, so it's surrendering to divine timing and doing what I can now, but surrendering the results continuously, no, because this creates a lot of momentum and expectation, but then letting it go and letting it go constantly. But it's been a big lesson. I think Pluto there, as I said, I still look at my Pluto and I'm like, and then I understand. I find that sometimes in Pluto that also relates to power and being so there, so protagonist in my child. I think it's been a journey of being afraid of my own power, to be honest, of understanding power as surrender, no? And through those layers and layers, and I'm sure I still have many layers to go through, the surrender, actually accessing what I would call true power, which it's really not ours. It's like allowing divine power to flow through us. No, but I think Pluto there has been for me fear of actually embodying the authority of Saturn, the power of Pluto there. And I think sometimes I still touch that. And being very astrologically technical, if you see my Mercury is squaring, exactly squaring Saturn and also Pluto, and is conjunct my south node. So for me, that's been challenging, to be honest, because even though I find that whatever we have with our south node, we have mastery of, so we're good at it. So I see my Mercury there, and I'm like, okay, obviously I was going to be a speaker, writer, or something. This has been going on for lifetimes, no? But this square, if you, it has created a tension in my mind that I have really have to work through because it's a fear. Imagine the aspect of Saturn and Pluto of control. So it's a fear in my mind, because it's Mercury, of losing control. So I have a very controlling mind, no, which is very, it feels like a very good resource for structuring messages and for being a storyteller, obviously. But in terms of my mind body, it creates tension in my mind body and fear of losing control. Like my mind really wants to be in control. So that has been a journey because it has created at moments in my life a lot of anxiety that comes from the mind. No, and figuring out that square and figuring out where this anxiety was coming from, and like looking at my chart, and I was like, where is this coming from? Is this because I'm too sensitive? Because the 12th house? Because the moon? And I was like, where is this? Where is this coming from? And then I saw that square, and I was like, okay, this is where it's coming from. It's tension in my mind, fear, Pluto, of losing control, Saturn, of my mind. And that was
Mm.
very enlightening for me because then I could see it as something a bit more objectively, like, okay, so this is what's happening to me. This is my mind body, and it has a karmic element to it. And this is a lifetime that I need to work through a different way of using my mind body that doesn't come from that, well, that tension. I don't think tension is negative. I think tension invites us to move. So I was like, this is where I'm invited to move. I need to move past this experience of my mind into something higher. Did that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it kind of like opened my mind. Hmm. Okay, I hear you. Yeah. And I think I see that flexibility aspect you were speaking about between the all the traffic, let's say traffic that's happening in Capricorn and Libra. Libra being
Uh-huh.
about, as you were saying, what word did you use? Like a pendulum, and we're just going back and
Uh-huh.
forth until we find that balance. So I'm imagining a structure having to do that dance. Um,
Sí.
so Saturn and timeliness, what's been your experience with time in terms of catching up, feeling late, feeling right on time? Has time ever felt like a foe? It sounds like time is a friend now, but has time ever felt like a foe for you?
Yes, definitely. I have, I don't know if it's because of my chart or because of what I did as work since I was a child, working on television sometimes and everything. I have like an inner timer. Like if you tell me you have 3 minutes for this, I don't have to look at the clock. Like I just time is engraved in my body. Like I can hear it. So I'm like, okay. Like somehow my body knows what 6 minutes are like or like what 15 minutes are like. It's very peculiar. So I'm very punctual, obviously, which is not the best thing to be in Mexico because no one is. So I'm always there on time, precisely, not later, not earlier. It's crazy. It's crazy how punctual I am, even when I don't try to. It's like something that's just a part of me. And it's
Mhm.
funny. I laugh at it because this is a country where everyone's late. Now, so I'm always there earlier. Even if I go to, I don't know, a concert, I arrive when, if it says 8 o'clock, I arrive at 8 o'clock. And then it starts at 9:30. And I'm like, this is funny. Like my mind really doesn't understand why people don't follow time. What is wrong with them? Now I'm more relaxed about it. I just laugh. But it is friendlier, but as I said, it is something that I have to be aware of, because if I go into like my inertia without my awareness present, um, I feel like I'm being chased by time, like time is running out. Like the default of that configuration in my system feels like I'm running late. Like I really need to stop and breathe and say, "You're not running late," no? Or like I tend to do I used to now. I'm kinder now, but like to-do lists, no, really filled to-do lists and feeling this adrenaline about it. And so my relationship with time it has felt like pressure for many years. And sometimes it feels like that, and I do need to be intentional and say, we'll get done whatever we can get done. It's this aspect of surrendering to divine timing, which is also surrendering control, because it's a madness that it is in my hands. No, at the end, what's going to happen will happen. But yes, it's been a sort of dichotomic relationship with time. I think what started healing sort of this experience of feeling pressured by time was entering cyclical time, no, entering a relationship with the moon, a relationship with the seasons, a relationship with the earth. That has allowed me to shift my experience of time from a place that felt like very pushy to a place that just feels more natural, actually. No, but I had to shift it, and I still have to be aware sometimes, no, that I'm pushing myself like I'm late, and I'm like, late for what? Stop it. See, it's still there sometimes, but it's like an echo.
So when I think about Saturn, I think about the scythe and an old, maybe grandmother now, I guess. Before, well, no, in my mind, the way that I thought about it before in preparing for this interview, just this image of this old, detached individual, maybe a skeleton, wearing a black robe, using the scythe, um, but like they're standing in a field and they're harvesting grain in this wide open space. And there was
Mm.
this image of the sun beating down on this person, because Saturn's like right up there, with your midheaven, the most visible, kind of open to a wide array of eyes. That's where Saturn is. So, with Saturn and Libra sitting in this space, is there an experience of harvesting in a way where maybe you feel like there are many eyes on you, that what you're reaping is on display? And you just said that you were like basically a child actor. So maybe, and okay, but the question still stands in terms of your experience. Do you feel like what you reap is often on display for others?
Interesting. You were mentioning the sun and this open space, and you're getting all the sun in your face. I was like, yeah, there you are. If what I reap is very visible for others, I think I've always been. It's peculiar what you ask, because at some point I looked at my chart and I've always been kind of visible. I don't mean like massively famous or anything, but as you just mentioned, I've always been doing something that is public somehow, no? Since I was very young. And at some point I did question myself, where did this come from? Because there are parts of my chart that seem to be more private, or that perhaps wouldn't even feel so comfortable about it, because I have the sun in the 12th and the moon in Pisces and these other parts that are like very sensitive. And I was like, it's funny how I've always been somehow there. Yeah, I guess as a conclusion, in terms of showing up in this public way with Saturn there and the journey of showing up from a place of authenticity, one thing that I think Saturn calls us all into, but it has felt very strong in my chart, and every time I'm out of alignment with this calling, I could feel it. Saturn makes me feel it, is integrity. I think Saturn is about integrity. It's about coherence. No, so yes, I've had these different stages of being public somehow, but the moment I'm doing it from a place that is lacking integrity or coherence, it just feels it. Saturn makes me feel it, and I think one of the big lessons of Saturn for everyone, but it's very in my chart. I guess the Libra placement and the whole configuration is about doing it from a place of integrity and from a place of truth. And this requires to go through many layers of showing up, even when it feels very vulnerable to show up in life. No, so I think that's been a big journey for me. And because of the whole chart, to me, it feels that whatever I show up speaking about, life immediately gives me a lesson to embody it. It's crazy. So I show up with my Sunday speech on astrology, and I'm like, I think the invitation is about this and that and that, and it's as if Saturn stands in front of me and says, "Really? Okay, let's see how that looks in your life. Here's your first lesson, Monday." No, so I think he's always calling us into integrity, and yeah, that's part of the maturation. I guess that's what it's been like for me. And at this point, I can say I have befriended Saturn, and I enjoy his her role in my life. I'm always aware of the tendency that comes from before, so I don't fall back into it. No, I think it's always an intentional exercise of how am I choosing to express and experience the planetary forces that are available for me. I think that that's the co-creative aspect of astrology. If not, we tend to go into the inertias of what we were given. And evolution, in terms of evolution, we can choose how we want to express this energy, going through the process, of course. But I think as we are evolving as humanity, our understanding of archetypes needs to evolve as well. Our understanding of astrology. So displaying new sort of layers and fractals of these masters, like Saturn, it seems important to open ourselves up, not to break the structure, but to widen it, no, to make it more flexible, like we said. So I guess that would sort of wrap up my Saturn, my Saturn speech.
Did you ever think that your life was gonna look like what it looks like now?
No, never. No, not at all. It came as a big surprise. I never in my life thought I'd be an astrologer, a storyteller, and that my life would be like it is right now. It has come as a surprise. So that has been also the surrendering my plans and allowing life to unfold and just listening to the calling. But yes, no, it has been a big surprise, which I enjoy very much now. But there were some moments where I was like, they were asking me to let go of everything that felt safe and that had given me identity, no, and even money in my life. No, and I was like, really? Do I have to jump? No, but it was such a strength calling inside of me that I just had to. I had to trust. So I think that's a big lesson from that Pluto there as well. It's like trust. The transformation happens and the rebirth happens and the calling you into your purpose happens. So yeah, I think we all need to hear this at some point. You go through the other side and it's amazing, no? But there's a moment when you're like, really? Do I have to die? And yeah, sometimes we do. But we're always, the full cycle is always including rebirth. So it's okay. It's just the cycle.
Thank you. I'm just so grateful that you are talking to me, that you joined me. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
You have a beautiful energy, such a beautiful voice, so sweet, so tender, and so harmonious. So I've enjoyed this talk. You've allowed me to see to like ground things that were just there, but I hadn't really become aware of. So I thank you for that, and also for your beautiful input and perspective. Thank you.